but this is the first moxie confidence quarterback we've had since Beathard. Welcome back to the ANF Podcast, where we cover Iowa sports. On today's episode, we're going to be drafting the top 10 players in the offense based on their NFL potential. Do we expect them to be all Big Ten? Do we expect them to have 50 catches this year and 10 touchdowns? Based on that criteria, we'll also be able to discuss each of the players individually in position groups and kind of the depth of the team as well.
Also, a quick request. Can you guys go out and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and then leave a question for us in the comments. Also, if you could share this with any of your friends, that'd be really helpful for us as well.
Well, I got to start this year. Connor got the first draft last year, an offense draft. And I think this draft is pretty easy, number one overall. It's kind of like Cooper last year in defense. I'm going to go with Luke Lachey. I think if there's one guy in this team that can make it to his second contract in NFL, surefire, I think it's him. I think it's kind of a rare situation that he might be the only guy that, can make that second contract in the NFL in the starting 11. And it's odd to say
in the
that.
Starting 11, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's odd to say that with, the depth and returning starters and how old the offensive line is, that we don't have an offensive line we're drafting at 2, drafting at 30. And I think that kind of highlights that issue. But to go into Lachey in more detail, I think he's going to have a massive year. I think you could tell Cade loved him as a target early in the Utah State and Iowa State games. He kind of racked up, 14, 15 targets in those first 2 games. We are very lucky to keep him this year. If his ankle doesn't explode against Western Michigan last year, he's in the NFL right now. So you have this really developed player that should be gone. And we usually lose those guys at the tight end position. If you think about Hawkinson and Font. I think this guy's going to be second team all Big Ten at worst. I think when we go into the NFL draft process, he's going to be, second round pick. And there's be people flirting with the first round pick, thinking of how well Iowa's produced Iowa tight ends. You have, Hawkinson and Laporta as most 2 recent perfect hits as a drafting, as a drafted tight end. They're going to see Lachey in that same mold. But he is kind of a different mold, too.
Well, I think he does fit the Hawkinson mold more than Laporta, just because he is that true inline tight end. Oddly enough, so his dad was no tackle at Ohio State. He struggled in his first 2 or 3 seasons on the team to be a dominant blocker. He's actually a rather poor blocker his first 2 years. But this last year, thinking back to Iowa State, a couple of reps he had against Utah State, he was a truly dominant inline blocker. And that's where those NFL draft scouts can see that differentiation from other tight ends. A lot of guys who can put up good numbers in the receiving game, but they can't be an every down tight end.
You see the complete player.
You see the complete player, and that's where Hawkinson became the top 10 pick he did, is because he was viewed as essentially an extra tackle. And at Lachey's weight and size, they're going to see him as an every down tight end that you can use as that wall down man, but also be a man you can use in the receiving game and then in the red zone.
It's a rare tight end. I mean, you think of Gronkowski is obviously the perfect example of that, but generally now tight ends are either catchers or blockers. You see the Disleys of the world, they're, in line, and then you see how they kind of use Laporta at times. That's kind of more of a receiving threat. Lachey has the opportunity to sell both of those at a high level.
Certainly. Do you want to move on to number 2?
Yeah.
So I think the easiest one to do is just Cade McNamara.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's been a lot of questions about his health. I'm going to lean into that he's okay. We have photos of him without moving around without a brace. Yeah. I might be having a little hopium. But the guy, if healthy, is the most important piece on this team. Quarterback's obviously the most important position on the team, but you don't really have a dude behind him that you have any trust in. Sullivan's okay. If you ever get to Marco, that's a real problem. But Cade was a super big recruit coming out of high school, top 10 recruit, had beat out Joe Milton at Michigan. Milton on Armtown alone was a surefire NFL player.
Yeah.
McNamara beat him out.
And I think that's always lost. I think it's lost in the story. Maybe McNamara hasn't played in 2 years. And so you kind of lose the narrative of his career. But Milton just won the 6th round to the Patriots. And the reasoning behind the draft pick was that he's arguably the most talented, in terms of just skill set, quarterback some scouts have ever seen. You can throw it 80 yards. He's 6'5", he's 240. A similar guy, Anthony Richardson, went top 10 with the same kind of pedigree or same kind of stats. And so for McNamara to beat him out at Michigan,
and then only be unseated by a national title winning top 10, or I guess 11th pick in the draft in J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah.
He was sandwiched between 2 talented guys, and they had to, go into the season. Granted, he was a Big Ten title winning QB. He led Michigan to their first playoff. they had to kind of give him ebb and flow in those first couple games. They couldn't just give it to JJ. The fact they even made it a question with JJ is a testament to how good of a player he is.
Yeah.
And really what separates him from other Iowa QBs is just how he manages the line of scrimmage. I think what we noticed right away from when he took over the starting role for Iowa is he just seemed oddly comfortable back there.
Yeah.
He has so many little tricks that high-end QBs have. He extends plays not through, scrambling around, but just by backing up slowly, letting his receivers develop in their routes.
Yeah.
He takes educated risk. He throws a lot of 50-50 passes where if he sees a defender's back turned to him, he's going to put a 50-50 ball on.
Yeah.
You saw that draw more PIs than we've seen in the past. You saw more contested catches out of that. He doesn't have exceptional arm talent, but he's got enough in him where he can make any throw on the field.
Yeah.
And I think overall, he's just a competitor and a leader of a team.
And honestly, you have to take Lachey one, but I could do 20 minutes on why Cade is such a exciting prospect at QB this year. What we saw from him last year, why he was so, we were so excited early in the season. Like, this is the best QB play we've had in a long time. And it might come from how bad Iowa QB play has been, but it's hard not to get excited if you watch him closely because he shows as a clearly highly trained QB in terms of his release, how quick it is, how he always sets his feet. He always has the ball, his feet are always set no matter what situation he's in. And then just how accurate it is in ball placement in massive situations. Like, he can choose to put it on the back shoulder of an in route where there's a safety coming up on the front side of the receiver. And he has that choice to make that back shoulder throw to that in route. He has so many small qualities about him that if you don't watch him closely, and if you look at the stats from the Utah State game, the Iowa State game, and you look at his profile as a player, he's not, going to juke somebody and, or throw a 60-yard bomb. It reminds me of like a Steph Curry type of like skilled player or a really good a Bohannon essentially, where this guy belongs on the field because he is just a quarterback. And that is the kind of the core aspect of him as a player.
Well, I think at the highest level, he just doesn't lack any self-belief.
Yeah.
He believes in everything he's doing. And that, from a quarterback's perspective, having confidence
As a team perspective.
that you trust in this guy to go out and win you a game. I think we should put this season in his hands a little more. And then, honestly, we didn't really get to see it play out.
Yeah.
Granted, he was only made it for like 4.5 games. I think if we would have made it into the lion's share of the Big Ten season with him, you would have seen us throw the ball close to 60-65% of the time just because of how poorly we were running the ball. And we would have won 11 games pretty comfortable if he stayed as our starting QB. Going into this season, you're going to play a lot of high-end level defenses. You're not going to have an O-line that shows up and can just manufacture yards through their
He's going to have to win games.
We're going to have to put almost every game in his hands at some point where he's going to have to go out and read a defense, be comfortable with taking, educated risk.
Yeah.
And I truly just believe he can do that at a high level. And I think he can lead us to a playoff in that facet.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned too, like, I want to highlight more of the educated risk. Like, he throws a very catchable ball. And why receivers are receivers and they're not DBs is because they are great at making contested catches. It's what separates those athletes. And if you look at Caleb Brown, all of his high school highlights and like kind of the, they talk about like the 7-on-7 games he's in, and there's a 2.5-minute clip on YouTube of him making like one-handed contested catches. Like, I think Caleb Brown could have a massive year this year with Cade because Cade can trust him.
Well, and Seth Anderson was an effective receiver under Cade.
Yeah.
And Seth just fell apart under Deacon because Deacon just threw a rope that Seth couldn't catch.
Yeah. And another aspect of Cade too that I think actually is the most exciting part about him is what kind of gets under the radar of maybe casual fans or someone that doesn't watch him, doesn't think about how he could lead Iowa's. Just the confidence and what he does to the winning culture of Iowa. And it's all about goal setting for him. And it changed last year. You could hear it by the kind of leadership of Iowa, of how they said, we don't want to make the Big Ten title game. We want to win the Big Ten title. The goal is not to make the Big Ten title game. And that's Cade. And he's leading that group and talking that way. And then you hear Higgins, this year. I think there was some event where they were doing signatures and they kind of asked him a question like, what are expectations? Like, we are good enough to make the playoff and we expect to be in the playoff. And that's not, like, Higgins is obviously a great leader on this team, and there's a lot of great leaders in the Iowa program. Like, it's just a lot of hard workers. Think of Campbell and Linderbaum. But this is the first moxie, confidence quarterback we've had since Beathard. And that's what really excites me is that you need that quarterback that goes, guys, we're not going to be good. We're going to be great. And you need team-led, your people that has to lead your team. It can't be the coaches. It has to be your players. And for an individual quarterback that's going to have so much on his shoulders every single game to say, we're going to do this, I'm going to do this, and then we're going to also win a lot of games. That's such an important aspect of a team's ability to win close games and have confidence to like do more than just like win 10 games and, compete against the good teams.
Well, I think that control at the line of scrimmage is really where we're going to see him and Lester become a dynamic duo. Being that 6-year QB now,
yeah,
it's a really unique spot to have a 24-year-old QB back there with the experience that he does have. Holding defenders in that C-gap position, holding linebackers, holding safeties with his mesh action, those reps, that ball handling, that takes a long time to develop. Having a guy who's seasoned in that, Michigan was almost predominantly all shotgun when he was there. That evolution, while we might take time to 3 or 4 games to work out the kinks, I think he could be such an exceptional player within this current system because of his skill set. And you have to extrapolate out, okay, say he has a really successful year, ends up 4th, 5th round draft pick. That opens the door now to this new recruiting era under Tim Lester.
Yeah.
If you can have a guy get drafted in the NFL after one good season, we might see a string of guys who are 2nd or 3rd string at an Ohio State, at a Penn State, Georgia, Florida, you name it, that see themselves as, okay, I can step into this program that's routinely a top 20, top 15 program and take them to that next level. No, I might not have, insane numbers, but I'm going to be playing for a team that's going to compete for a Big Ten title and also a playoff. Yeah. And that is an offer that almost no other team can offer because you have a defense that you can rely on.
Yeah, I think the forgotten stat too is Cade is 17-4 as a starter. 2 losses to Penn State, the loss to the national champion Georgia Bulldogs, and a loss to top 10 Michigan State on the road in a game that he played incredible. And actually, it's McCarthy that lost him a game with a critical fumble. So he has 4 losses in his entire career and 21 career starts. So this guy wins. And if you're going to make the comment that, he actually had the better team in the majority of those games, say, let's say 20 of those games he was the better team, it's like he's going to have the better team this year. Like you go down the schedule, all 12 games this year. Ohio State's the only one where you circled they're going to be better than us. So Cade's going to have 11 more games as the better team. And we have a QB that's not going to lose us games. And I think he's going to end up winning us 2 to 3 games.
I think
a
bigger part of that too is he's not going to be afraid to lose the game too. I think that's when we've had these QBs who come back later in their careers. You look at Petrus, Stanley in 2019, Rudock in 2014. They had really exceptional defenses.
Regression,
But then they saw their role is to just not make the big mistake. And I don't think Cade's going to play that way.
It's where Stanley went. Stanley was on this, great rise until he ended up, the coaching got to him where he became not a playmaker and not a guy who was thinking about how can I convert this 3rd and 10. He's like, how can I not turn the ball over on this 3rd and 10? I think Cade still got that part of his brain and his competitiveness, and that's where we could see it leading to a lot of wins.
We'll move on.
Yeah.
We are thrilled to announce a new sponsor of the ANF Podcast. Next time you're looking for an island vacation, consider Via Puesta del Sol or Via Puerto Escondido, both of which overlook the Pacific Ocean in Ocotal, Costa Rica, providing an exceptional all-inclusive experience for your family and friends. Visit their website, linked down below, for more information or to reserve your trip today.
Well, in the same line, I'm going to go with receiver 1, Caleb Brown. Looking through the stats of Western Michigan with Tim Lester there. Sky Moore had 1,300 yards his last year before he got drafted by the Chiefs. It's scary and like almost eerie how similar players he is to Caleb Brown. I'm not going to say Caleb Brown's got 1,300 yards. That's never going to happen under a Kirk Ferentz team, which is not how we play. But Lester knows how to get this type of receiver open. And if you're giving 1,300 yards to a 5'10 receiver, you can give it to a 5'11 receiver with almost the same body type. And if you watch Caleb Brown closely last year, his one-step cuts off out routes and 5-yard, hitches, he's got what you need to get open. And he's the only guy on the team other than Lachey that can get open against pretty much anybody, I believe. Against even Michigan, he was getting separation every single play. And now you have a good OC, a good QB, and Caleb fully adjusted to Iowa. Obviously he had some struggles early in the last year, first 6 games, not seeing the field, but he's fully acclimated now. And obviously he's had some runs in the road or run in the road with the law lately. Classic receiver 1 behavior.
I want to see that. As a receiver 1, that I put him down for 800 yards in the season. The minute I saw that come across my board, I was like, that's receiver 1. That's what we want to see.
But that's like he's fully acclimated now. You know, he's in the system of the playbook Lester's devising in the spring and the summer. His number one guy as a receiver. How do I get Caleb Brown touches in creative ways? I've done this already with Moore. I think he's in line for a big year.
Yeah, I reiterate all of that. I think he showed a really exceptional ability after the catch.
Yep.
Super strong, very subtle with his cuts. I think being a former running back, that always helps you and like beating the next guy after. And like, it's going to be interesting how Lester develops a system. I was thinking about this a lot today. I think you can still be a ball possession team, but you can do it in a more aggressive fashion. So if Kirk's not going to hire a guy that's going to come out and chuck the ball around, going to throw the ball 2/3 of the time, going to throw the ball downfield a lot. He really wants to be methodical in how his offense operates, but you can be a little bit more creative and not so stubborn from what we saw from Brian. I think having a guy like Caleb where you can trust him to get open against high-end talent and having a QB in Cade where you can trust him not to get baited into something poor, that combination early on this season could really take off. Hopefully, we'll get into some of the other receivers, but I think they're going to have kind of a full cupboard when it comes to guys that they can get the ball to. I think that's only going to benefit Caleb. And, you know, if I think Seth's going to take the step he does, I think the two of them could potentially have the best season we've seen since Smith and Vandenberg.
Yeah, definitely.
Should we move on?
Yeah, I think it gets really difficult now.
Yeah.
Once again, I'm not feeling comfortable drafting an offensive lineman here. I'm going to go with.
Didn't you just draft Caleb Brown?
Oh yeah, you're right. Hijack it.
Yeah, I will go Caleb Johnson. Yeah. So we've watched a lot of tape back this past week, and Caleb Johnson is a very frustrating player to watch because even in well-blocked plays, he can still only go for 2. And we've broken down this a lot, but a lot of it comes to how he actually runs. Runs high. He's very upright, and he's not a squatty runner. That's kind of what you want to see from your running backs, is having the ability to go lateral when they need to go lateral.
Yeah.
He excels when he has space. And we saw it all season. You saw a lot of outside zone for him. You saw a lot of sweeps for him.
Pitches. Yeah.
You can't have everything telegraphed when he's on the field that's going to go outside and is going to be something he can get his legs going. He has to have that added dimension where he can be comfortable running out of shotgun, running interior zone, running power, where he's going to be, a yard into the defensive backfield. Yeah. And now you got to go lateral.
Yeah. Well, can he go 2 gaps over?
And I think what we have to reiterate is that he was still a young running back. He's only a true sophomore last year. We've seen evolutions from running backs as they, spend more time learning the patterns. Running back is an incredibly difficult position. You have to have insane confidence, have to be in a rhythm to play it at a high level. The more he sees these patterns, the better he's going to get at it. And I think also this being now an NFL year, you might see him run a little bit harder.
Yeah.
He did a really poor job of keeping his feet moving, but the reason I'm drafting him here is because this offense is in just dire need of explosive plays.
Yeah.
If you can keep a defense off their toes just a little bit, what was so nauseating about Brian was you line up in these sets and everything would be telegraphed. He kept it essentially as simple as a high school offense at points. And that might have just been a process of having Deacon as your QB for 8 games, a guy who was recently on the team. But it didn't give our O-line, our running backs, any opportunities for space.
Yeah.
And what we've heard from spring practice and from Higgins is that there's actually a lot more pre-snap motion, which is something we've called for essentially the entire time we've been doing this podcast, because you can't have guys leaning on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
And hopefully with a little bit more misdirection, a little bit more window dressing, you just can create a step for him. And all Caleb Johnson needs is a step. And he's got all the physical tools you need to be a high-level running back.
Yeah.
Hopefully he just develops those more subtle tactics that LaShawn has. LaShawn went from our 3rd-string running back to our starting running back because he was able to make space in small areas. He was able to run harder. He was able to run through guys' face. That's really what Caleb needs to add to his game.
Yeah, and I think rewatching last year's film on just running back play, I liked LaShawn. LaShawn was a better back last year. I agree with why you're drafting Caleb above him, because he actually has that second dimension of housing, Purdue, Illinois, how many runs he had in the last 2 years. The game-changing 70-yard touchdowns. LaShawn's a better back-to-back or a better down-to-down running back. If you need 4 yards, you need 8 yards. If it's a poorly blocked play and you need him to squeak out 3 rather than a half yard, he's better in that situation just because of the given of his running style. So it all comes down to Lester and the O-line of how these running backs are used and which one we actually lean on. If Lester can remove that 8th defender in the box or cause that 8th defender in the box who's dropping down have a too high look to just hesitate. And it's through motion, it's through tempo, it's through formations, it's through fakes, it's through boots, it's all that stuff. If he can influence an 8th defender in a way where these running backs have an opportunity to, get him on equal ground. Running backs are the best athletes on the field. It's always been like that. Remember in 8th grade, best athlete in the field, he played running back. Still is. You have to get that defender and that running back on equal ground where there is a two-way go. And if it's Caleb in that situation, it's way scarier than it was LaShawn. But LaShawn operates in a better way when there's not a two-way go. And so it's a really interesting situation, and it all comes down to actually not the running back of who you want to give the ball to 20 times.
Well, I think if this will be interesting how Lester operates his offense. It's a lot of question marks. Are we still going to be an under center team, or are we going to move predominantly to shotgun?
Yeah.
Outside of first down, I think we really should move to shotgun team in second and third. But there are advantages to being under center, and Caleb Johnson is certainly an under center running back. He's not going to operate well out of shotgun where he has to make a jump cut from front side A to back side C. That's going to be a LaShawn thing. So he's not. If we transition to this shotgun style offense, Johnson's probably not going to be your guy. You're probably going to want to lean on LaShawn and maybe even Terrell Washington Jr. Those are the two guys I think that have that really good lateral ability.
Yeah.
But if you stay this under center football where we still utilize outside zone and counter, those are two things that Caleb Johnson is, perfect for.
Yeah. Well, I think I still got to draft a player. Counterpoint to the drafted Caleb, but I'm going to go Logan Jones. I think if you think of NFL caliber player on the offensive line, I think you have to go him. Just his makeup and what he's going to be able to test at in terms of strength-wise and speed and agility. He hasn't flashed yet. And I think if you can talk about Richmond, Colby, Jones, Steffens, Dunker, no one's really flashed over a season where we're like, we found our guy. But if you give me like the lineman I most anticipate to have an opportunity to have a great year, it'd be him, just based on his pedigree. And, you can use him in really creative ways. We used a one-man screen with him a few times. I think that could still pop up this year. I think you can pull him, he's going to play well in space. But it's weird to be in a position where an offensive line, we have like 5 starting offensive linemen with at least 2 years of experience, and they're all fourth-year players, and they're all just maybe drafted. And it's just such a weird spot to be in.
This is the first Iowa team we've had where it's been, you're working on 2 years, 3 years of drought. When was Linderbaum?
2021 last year.
So 2022, yeah, this would be technically the third year of a drought. And you've always had a guy. There's always been one. Yeah. And usually there's like a second guy who's close.
Alaric.
Who's going to be a 6th or 5th rounder that will be like for sure an NFL draft pick.
Yeah.
And then you've had usually really high level center play. I do like Jones as your pick. If you're going to pick an O-lineman, he's going to have the athletic prowess at the draft where they're going to be like, okay, this guy's exceptionally quick.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot of glaring weaknesses. He's gotten caught on a couple things in pass pro.
His size is the only thing.
His size is the thing, but at center, they'll go with those undersized guys. My pushback would probably be Connor Colby.
Yeah.
Just because I can't for the life of me figure out why Connor Colby isn't an all Big Ten player. During the recruiting process, remember watching his tape, how well he moved at his size. He's a super athletic guy. He's had exceptional blocks at the point of attack.
He got on the field as a true freshman, which is a massive, you circle that player every single time on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah. I think because the first 3 games, I remember our takeaway was, okay, the O-line's not playing great. We're not running the ball for a super high level. We are telegraphing a shit ton.
Yeah.
We're being very basic in our run concepts. That never really changed all season. Once you had the slew of injuries to Cade, Lachey, and then all,
it kind of reset the team.
You saw these ridiculously heavy boxes with no fear of throwing the ball. I think that made everyone on the offense look worse, especially the O-line.
Yeah.
And then you'd have just times where we line up in 21 personnel and we run inside lead against an 8-man box, and we're playing a Big Ten team that's ranked in the top 25 in defense.
Yeah.
It's never going more for 2.5.
Yeah.
And, they were comfortable with that last year because your quarterback was Deacon.
Yeah.
And him not throwing the ball was always a benefit.
Yeah.
Maybe we can operate on this model where we're just going to beat people to death in the fourth quarter. We'll make our push.
Look,
and it kind of took root. Rutgers, all of a sudden, you started running the ball in the fourth quarter when you dropped the score.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, it was that model to a T.
Yeah.
You broke one run, and it won you the game, and all of a sudden you're in the fourth quarter, and you bashed your head in for 6 straight drives where you didn't get a first down, and then you're in a massive position where it's not 7-6, and you need a first down, and we ran for 3 straight first downs, kicked a field goal. It was, you could see like Kirk, and we had the sickness at the end of the year. We're like, oh, the key is for this new team is just to beat your head against the wall until the fourth, and that's how we're going to win.
Hey, Illinois.
Yeah.
You got into the fourth quarter, you would hit enough body blows where that final knockout punch came.
Yeah.
And that was, as sad as it was, that was our only option.
Yeah.
But
Nebraska.
You were in a lot of third and longs. And that's where our pass protection, Richmond got beat like a drum so many times. Dunker got beat like a drum. And I think we were unfairly hard on them because it wasn't a communication issue a lot of time. Yeah. Granted, I really do think this team lacks, it's not a secret, but they lack high-end tackle play. Mm-hmm. The reason outside zone has worked under Ferentz for as long as it has is because you have a mauler at left and right tackle, and they can take a DN for a 3-yard run.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, once that edge gets set, the whole defense falls apart because you got linebackers running to the back of that D end. Mm-hmm. That edge becomes a full speed run.
Yeah. Well, because you went Sheriff to Kittle being essentially the tackle.
Yeah.
To Alaric and Wirfs.
Yeah.
And so you had this really string of like edge blocking in the system that you really did have we have a go-to dancing bear that's going to give us a one-on-one win every time. And we haven't had it since.
And really where we fell short was always interior line play. And what's odd is I actually feel far better about our interior line play. So we have 2 maulers now in Steffens and Colby.
Yeah.
I feel very comfortable about those guys in pulling situations and in down blocks. Mm-hmm. The issue is, we talked about this prior to the pod, but we don't really have an identity of what we want to do in a run game. 2 years ago, we put a bunch of weight on our guys. And we said we're going to become more of a power team, or we're going to be more of a wall down and pull team. Mm-hmm. After that failed to work, we stripped the weight down. We're going to go back to our zone. We're going to be lighter on our feet. Mm-hmm. We didn't see dominant edge blocks. Our tackle play didn't take a jump by lightening them up. Now you're trying to run power with guys who can't wall down. Just not having that dominant. I mean, I like Dunker. I think Dunker is actually a fairly good run blocker. His struggles are just in pass pro. And that's where it's going to be interesting to see how Leicester balances this, because you're really going to want to stay out of third and long with how poor our tackle play is. Yeah. And especially against the good teams, I could really see us turtling up a fair amount. That's what you saw against Penn State, was essentially full turtle for 3/4 of a game. Mm-hmm. But hopefully Leicester has a little more tricks in his bag when it comes to motion, when it comes to just disguising and marrying things together. Yeah. I hope we don't see, just basically a Frankenstein offense where we're trying to throw an RPO. We still have our outside zone boot game. And
disjointed. It's not married together. Yeah.
It's not married together. We need a more holistic view of our offense. And perhaps that's what Leicester can offer. Yeah. Is like, hey, how do we marry all these things together? But it's going to be a huge question mark going into the season, but I don't think it's the end of the world, because I think our pass pro can be sufficient on first and second down to put the ball in Cade's hands. Yeah. And I think if we don't see a growth in the offense, it's just going to come down to how well Cade can carry us through these games.
Yeah. All right, I think you're up now because I just picked Logan.
Yeah, I'll go Seth Anderson.
Nice.
So he really flashed in the first 3 games of the season, as I mentioned with Cade. I don't think he lacks any athletic ability. He doesn't have super high-end speed, but route running seems to be very clean. Hands seem to be okay with Cade. He was a little slight. I think if he put on, we'll see what his weight comes in at. If he put on 8 to 10 pounds, maybe even less than that, I think that's where he could take the big step. Being a number 2 on a team, I guess he's going to truly be like a number 3
behind Lachey
and Caleb. I think he's got a chance to shine. I think for our number 3 target, that's okay. I don't think that's the end of the world. He's shown some being a dynamic player too. He took a reverse against Wisconsin. Kind of looked like Keegan Johnson there for a moment where he got hit and stumbled. I think he's a talented enough player to have a 25 to 20 catch season, and that might be enough in this system.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how it develops. And I think to highlight this discussion, I'm going to draft KJ Parker here. I highlight him a lot in our recruiting video. I think this is the best receiver prospect we brought in the last 10 years since ISM. Super polished, plays like a college receiver already. Like, just very thoughtful how he plays football. And that's the only way to describe it. It's as a receiver, it's kind of the most skilled position on the field other than quarterback. And it comes out through his play all
It's
the
an
time.
artist. Yeah.
Yeah. And my anticipation is actually he's going to take over Seth Anderson. So I would have drafted him at this 6th spot ahead of him. But it's going to be such a vital role to this team is building out this receiver room where you saw it in 2021 where the first third down we had against Michigan, we run an out route to Laporta. And Michigan doubles it with their safety at 5 yards. They double an out route to a tight end. And it was so glaringly obvious who our number one option was. And it's the kind of the key of offense is if you don't have legitimate weapons that can hurt multiple parts of your team, coordinators are going to play the percentages. They're going to go, if we take away this guy or these two guys, they're not going to convert 3 straight third downs. And so we need this skill package or these skill players and this kind of skill room to develop to give Leicester options to feel comfortable attacking defenders with. So if it's Anderson, can he beat their third best defender in a situation where he's actually head up one-on-one with no help? Can it be KJ Parker where he has an opportunity to convert a 3rd and 7 that's kind of an unpredictable call because it's going to a true freshman? And that's where an offense goes from 2019 where you kind of only had one option in ISM and other good offenses we've had to 2015 where Jacob Hillier's catching a 3rd and 7 curl route. You have Kittle scoring 7 touchdowns as a backup tight end. You have Kenzari making plays in the screen game. You need this depth of offensive skill talent to actually give yourself the explosive plays, the third down conversions. And as much as we want to put it in Cade's hands or the offensive line's hands, every good offense has just good skill. And that's what it comes down to the most. And good teams have good skill. So we need
Well, you're going to have so
3 or
many
4 guys to develop.
And that's where, we have, watching so much Iowa football, you see defenses beat us through scheme. I mean, offenses beat us through scheme quite often. Usually when there's a big play, it's because it's a really well-designed play.
Yeah.
Almost every team in college football lines up in predominant man-to-man, where it's like, can you beat their best corner? Can you beat their best safety on your tight end?
Yeah.
If you don't have man beaters, and they can line up in man-to-man every time, and you have free, basically the safeties then are free to play the run at their own volition, it becomes really tight really fast.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can add that dimension where they're scared to get beat for 70 yards and they have to call a more passive game,
Right.
That's where your run game takes off. And I think where Leicester can really take the step in the recruiting process in the transfer portal is by putting serious numbers down on this year's tape.
And it's all about the build, like the builds of these players. Parker and Anderson and Caleb Brown aren't 4-star builds. Brown is just because how fast he was, and he's a running back. But if you can sell a 5'11" receiver in the Midwest or the East Coast that's a 3-star to Iowa and say, hey, I brought this 3-star in from who had 2 offers from Boston College and Army, and now he's second team All Big Ten his senior year and he's going to the NFL. That is the recruiting process we are dying to have at receiver, is to show production through under recruitment players, and then you sell these guys who have maybe an offer to Wisconsin, maybe an offer to West Virginia, and you can steal them going, if you come to us, we'll develop you. Even though you're a 3-star, you're an 86 overall and rivals, we can make you a player. And I think that's where I want to see this room go with Leicester and with whatever offense he's going to run, is to sell these undersized receivers. If you are a 3-star, you can come here and be productive.
Well, that will be the interesting part about this whole thing is so many teams build the philosophy of their team about recruiting QBs and receivers.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a big point about this with Wisconsin. Ohio State, you could be up 35 in the third quarter. You're still chucking the ball around because the receivers need their yards. The QBs need their yards. That's the only way you're going to consistently recruit those two positions. And it's interesting because so many teams make that decision where it's like, are you going to recruit QBs and receivers or the other positions on the team?
Yep.
Are you going to sacrifice running backs? You're going to sacrifice a defense. Defense is going to have worse numbers the longer they're on the field.
Yep.
The more you throw the ball, the longer the game gets.
Yep.
The more likely you are to lose a game, and the longer you prolong it, the more risk you take in the passing game. So it'll be interesting if Kirk makes that evolution where he's going to be more comfortable running up the score.
I don't think he ever will. I think under Kirk, but my point is that you still can find ways to get receivers on your squad without those gaudy numbers. If you're the true number one, it's like kind of where Copeland was.
You're never going to have depth, and that's where our issue comes in. Is that you can sell a number one. It's probably why we got KJ Parker, why we've gotten ISM in the past. Is they look at their recruiting rankings and go, they don't have a single fucking receiver on their team.
Yeah,
but then where is number 2, 3, and 4, and 5 and 6 when you have an injury?
Yeah.
And that's where Iowa really falls short. Is you can't sustain injury at receiver, or you're putting out a guy who's some white dude, 5'10" white guy.
Yeah, but if you can recruit a kid that's, he's going to go to Navy or he's going to go to Marshall, and if you become very good at talent acquisition and you can sell them Iowa, that is the kind of the key, right? Because then
that's where we've been for the past how many years?
But we've just picked the wrong kids.
We picked blockers.
We've picked, your Vines, you're picking Ragaini,
Lockett.
You're picking Lockett, you're picking up the Florida leftovers. If he can have an eye of what Sky Moore was, if he can have an eye of what good MAC level receivers are, and that's what needs to change, is that he can actually have this ability to grab under recruited receivers. And maybe that doesn't exist because receivers so clearly 4 stars, so clearly 5 stars.
Well, I think a broader point here is, do you shift to recruit receiver targets over tight end?
Yeah.
And that's, frankly, if you want to be frank about it, you've had how many first-round tight ends under Ferentz?
Yeah.
Have any of them truly led to an explosive offense?
Mm.
Yes, you can develop them at a super high level. Yes, they're integral to how you want to run boot action, be a run-dominant team. But those big guys running laterally, it's always 10 yards.
Yeah. It's a nice story.
It's a nice story. But if you want to forego tight end development to then now recruit receivers who are the true playmakers within college football.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at any high level team, it's because they have dynamic receivers that when they get the ball, they can make plays.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be a targets thing. Are you going to throw the ball more to receivers, or are you going to throw more of the ball to tight ends?
Yeah.
And I'm speaking about this, Michigan went through a whole season without throwing to a receiver. They threw their tight ends almost every down.
Yeah.
Or they ran the ball.
Right.
So, but
can you recruit to that level on the offensive line?
Yeah. Is your O-line and running back room the best in the country?
Well, but the easy thought process too is Hawkinson and Font were 2 first-round tight ends in the same class, right? When you have 2 first-round receivers in the same class, you have the best offense.
You have a Heisman winning QB every time.
You have Jaden Daniels Heisman winning QB, and you have Joe Burrow Heisman winning QB. So
or you have Dwayne Haskins goes in the first round because he's got Olave, Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, it wasn't Haskins, but Stroud.
Yeah.
He had some dogs too. But
yeah.
It's just receivers. We had 2 first-round tight ends in 2018. We scored 14 points against Northwestern.
Less than, I think, wasn't it
13?
I think it was 10.
Yeah. So it's does the tight end production and being tight end has it helped offense? No. It's made us.
But then what's your recruiting base?
Right.
Out of the Midwest, who are you going to get more high level players out of? Receiver or tight end?
And you can turn 3-star tight ends into 5 stars. Can you turn 3-star receivers into 5 stars? So maybe it is the right choice to stick with tight ends because you actually have the ability to have under-recruited, undervalued players that you turn into a 5-star.
And this is the discussion we have every time. And it kind of gets to this dark place where it's you kind of have to know who you are.
Yeah.
And moving into, Minnesota you would point to as the quintessential Midwest offense in 2019.
Yeah.
They've regressed every year since then because they lost their juice. They had Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman.
Yeah.
Bateman was, a true sophomore that year, and Tyler Johnson was a homegrown recruit. But they haven't been able to stack up receiver recruits in the future because you're playing in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Receivers don't want to go play 6 games in the snow.
Yeah.
Or they don't want to play 6 games in the cold. You're not going to recruit QBs at a super high level because they don't want to go play in the cold. They're going to go play for Texas A&M,
Yeah.
Florida, Miami. So it does become a issue where what do you lean into, but it can't be as barren as Brian left the receiver room. You can't have a receiver class of Arlen Bruce, Keegan Johnson, and
Brody
Brecht vacate instantaneously. You can't have Charlie Jones leave to a rival to go catch 120 balls. If you're going to identify a guy, you have to find a way to keep him happy. And that has to be a larger part of like our offensive philosophy is how do we make these big ego guys still happy? Because that's football. Like, and like we just mentioned with Caleb Brown being receiver one and getting DUI instantaneously.
Yeah.
Like that's a reality of receiver plays. You have big ego guys that sometimes aren't going to be team first. But you got to live with it. You got to start being able to manage these personalities. You got to have a Mike Tomlin team where you can utilize an Antonio Brown for 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And then, he gets off the team and he completely implodes.
And that's actually probably the real thought is not to actually shift away from tight end play or like tight end targets. It's probably just when you do get a dog, when you do find that ISM, when you do find a Caleb Brown and you get him on as a receiver one, you have to get him the ball. You have to treat them like they are a different player on the team because they are. They're the best athlete on the team.
Yeah, receiver's the best player on the team.
And so you have to treat them, and that's against the Iowa mantra. It's like we are the military. We're all the same. We all wear the same clothes. We're all, we're the same people. But the receivers got
to treat receivers differently.
So that is where we live.
I think that
I think it's time to move. I think it's time to move on.
Yeah. But it's a good point to talk about.
Yeah.
You have to start shifting the program in its culture to allow for receivers to flourish.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. So who's up? You went KJ Parker?
You went Seth Anderson. I went KJ Parker.
I'll go Addison Ostranga then.
Yeah. Easy.
So he probably should have went higher. He probably should have went over Seth. I kind of forgot about him for a moment there. But
not based on his last year's performance, but what he could be.
And just the tight end development and then also usage. You're likely he's going to end up falling into the third most targets. We did hear an anecdote from LaShawn that they're actually going to use running backs in the passing game more split out. We actually call for that. I think it's a brilliant way to get teams in base sets and then utilize them outside the box. But I see no realm of possibility where we completely abandon outside zone and boot action off that. That's going to be 2 tight end sets. Ostranga did struggle early on this season. He played a lot of patty cake in the blocking game. He was not a dominant blocker. You did see him have the key critical block in Illinois for the touchdown. That's where he needs to take the giant step.
Yeah.
He does have enough athletic ability where he was receiving targets with All and Lachey on the field. He's obviously an athletic enough guy to be a number 1 tight end one day. I don't know if he's at the level of Lachey, Laporta, Font, Hawkinson. But we also said the same thing about Lachey when he was young too. I think it was his first year where he was carrying 250 and playing with 250.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to grow into your body and get the strength and all the tendons, catching up with the weight you're carrying.
And that's like exactly where I see him too. It's last year he looked like the game was a little too fast. And what he did was overcompensate. He's like, I'm gonna play as fast as possible. And it felt like he was leaning, he was like sprinting by people. When he got the ball, he just ran straight. He never even looked to set up a back cut. And we can tell in his high school film, he has that lateral ability in his game. But he always just caught and just ran for the first down, beeline for the sideline in the first down. Just you could tell he's just really nervous. And but all the coaches love him. We loved his high school film. He had some blocks too where he'd be the pulling tight end and he would block nobody, or he blocked the backside of his own player. And it just felt like he was overthinking a lot and just not playing oh, I know exactly who I'm going to here. And I'm going to set him up this way. And I'm playing the game rather than just playing the play. And I think he has a really good opportunity to still become a Lachey, a Laporta, a really good tight end for Iowa. But he also, if you told me he was Sean Byer, where he was a consistent starter and then, had a good senior year, productive, and then fizzled out and didn't make the NFL, I could believe that too. It's right now.
Yeah, this is the year.
We'll see it this year. And maybe next year when he gets a starting position, but most likely you'll see a flash this year if it's going to happen. And so we'll know in the first 4 games if they're we got to get Ostranga the ball 3 times a game. And he's making moves. He's playing faster. So it'll be very apparent early in the season.
Yeah, it's good 2 points though. He's got to become a lot more dominant blocker, which that evolution takes a long time.
Yeah.
As a tight end who was much maligned for his blocking, I resonate with that. And then after the catch, you need to start seeing more. You need to start seeing more Laporta, start throwing some guys.
Hesitation.
Yeah. Have some more wiggle to you.
Yeah.
We'll move on though.
Yeah. So it's pick number 9. Let's round it out with the offensive lineman. I think I'm going to go with Colby here. You haven't drafted him yet.
We got to go with Sean Williams.
I'm going to go Colby. I think just for NFL ability, I think it pays off this year. If obviously we could have drafted him higher, but I think grabbing him at 9 is a safe bet, because if you told me 5th, 6th round after this year, Lester opens up the 8th man in the box, a little more confusion on the defense, not playing as fast, just a little more just overall confusion of the defense. And this guy that now has 4 years of learning from not just anybody, but Kirk Ferentz. Like, here's how you step on his own block. Like, he's repping that now. He's playing senior ball and he's playing more confidently. He's got the pedigree, obviously, from his high school film. If it all came together this year and he played well, it wouldn't blow my mind if he was the late round draft pick.
Well, that's kind of my opinion for the whole line. You go down the list. None of these guys were poorly recruited players. Richmond was recruited by Kansas State and a couple other Power Fives. Bo Steffens had offers from LSU and Missouri and all these other high-level teams. Connor Colby was obviously a high-level 4-star recruit. Gettings Dunker, I think, became a 4-star recruit even without a lot of offers. Logan Jones, huge recruit. It's just such an interesting equation where we've talked about this a lot over our first season, but and we said this at the beginning of the season, if this O-line doesn't develop into something, there's got to be a strong look in the mirror do we really need to reset this whole game? Yeah.
And this one of our Q&A questions was dissect the O-line or go into more detail about what we think about the O-line from expectations. And I think you're setting it up well.
Yeah. And I think we have to trust Lester to allow these guys to have some advantage from a schematic standpoint. Brian and Kirk, I think, as a Megatron of thought, just became so stubborn in, let's not overthink this. We're teaching the guys the right way. They're strong enough, quick enough. If we give them a step at the stop, we're snapping the ball before they know what they are. They can win this rep. If we add some dimension of hiding the ball, I think this O-line can look pretty decent. But it's not going to be a domino line.
Yeah,
I think the tackle play, you're just not going to have that down block, that outside zone up the wall, up the field block that we've seen in the past. You might see us dominate some of the lower tier Big Ten teams later in the season.
I think if Lachey's involved, I think you could see some dominant double teams.
Yeah, but that's going to be Lachey.
Yeah,
that's not Richmond's just not a strong enough guy to be that dude. Mm-hmm. He's built too slight. You can see it in his build. He's just not that big of a dude.
Yeah.
Dunker's a little too plotty to be playing at right tackle.
Yeah.
Steffens, I like a lot. I think he actually has I think I would actually probably go Steffens over Colby just because he fits that more mauler guard and he's just such a big fella.
Yeah.
But it's weird to feel just better about the interior line. Tackle play has always been the calling card for Iowa, and we've made this point multiple times too, but the absence of Doyle is becoming very apparent.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not developing these freaks out wide that have NFL potential. And if that development ceases to exist, that's how you kill a program.
Yeah.
You don't have our differentiator. You can't run the ball you don't have the Sean Green 2008 season without the blocking he had.
Yeah. You had Brian Bulaga and Riley Reef from the same class or the same team. And that's what our program was based on, was that type of tackle play. And it's what separated, why we put up with our style plays, because we developed these offensive linemen. But if we've lost
you also can talk yourself into being passive if we can wear you down through running the ball.
Right.
And having big plays because of how dominant we are up front.
And if you lose that, what are we doing on offense? So you've based your entire program about winning the line of scrimmage and developing these players over time for 4 to 5 years of development. And I honestly think if it would have happened last year, if this O-line is really dominant this year, you would have saw more flashes of that last year. Because they were as old as they were they're all a year older, but they all were 3 years of experience, 2 years of experience, upperclassmen last year. Generally, if you're an NFL player, you're flashing then. All of them have.
It would have happened by now.
It would have happened. But it just puts into perspective of do we have any future on offense if this year doesn't go well on offensive line? And we've mentioned, it might not, most likely won't. But it has, as a coaching staff and as a developmental program and your full scope of how Kirk has to think about his program, it needs to shift in the recruiting aspect of it. Like you see Wisconsin, you see Minnesota, they grab 6'7" guys and they make them 340. Maybe that's the move. Maybe without Doyle, we can't get this, we get a guy at 240, we build him to 310, and he's bending, he's flexible, and he's quick. And he also, guess what? He also bench presses what the 340 guy does. And if we can't build that guy, that 240 to 310 guy, maybe just go for the more obvious Bo Steffens types. Go for those 3 stars that are 6'7" and maybe a little slow, but build them gigantic and try to regain that offensive prowess by giving up your old model. Because that model without Doyle might not be possible. And I think that's like the step that this offensive line group shows is like, this is it. When these guys graduate this year, or like, a lot of them hang it up, maybe we just missed on 5 straight guys that we all liked. We like
They
Jones.
seem like they had potential too.
We like Jones. We like Richmond. We like Colby.
But I mean, outside of Richmond, none of them were really built up. Colby was full grown. Steffens was full grown, showing up.
Yeah.
Jones had to put on weight. Dunker was, he was a pretty big, heavy guy coming in the building too, but he was, 240, I think, when we recruited him.
Yeah.
But you haven't had that like massive project like an Ike Bacher.
Right.
Who walked in the door at like 240.
Yeah.
And that guy, he's still playing the NFL himself too.
Right.
It just, I'm not willing to bury them 6 feet deep yet because of everything we've talked about. You might see teams have to back up an inch, have some question of whether this team could actually throw the ball against you, and that's might benefit them in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
You also might just have, go back to the call against Iowa State to end the game. We ran power out of heavy to end the game on a 3rd and 2.
No misdirection.
Can't think of a worse call. Honestly, can't think of a worse call. Caleb Johnson on the ball too.
Yeah.
Was that the reason?
Yeah.
Is because you just had someone who was so stubborn calling the plays, being reinforced by his dad, like, don't overthink this thing.
Yeah.
Just run power.
Yeah.
I think that added dimension could, unlock a couple of these dudes. I don't think you're going to see, dominant Joe Moore awards winners, but you could see an upper level Big Ten O-line because of experience.
I completely agree. I think it's going to be really interesting how this plays out. But
yeah,
I think it is if you want to circle one thing to fall on offense, obviously we hyped up Cade. O-line is going to be the story of the season. It shines so much on the program, and it's going to be positive or extremely negative, I think.
Well, I think that's a good point to wrap up. We can do Q&A next episode.
Yeah, I think we would draft Richmond there, and we would draft
LaShawn Williams.
Yeah. We can do the Q&A quickly. Well, it kind of did. We did O-line. That was one of the big questions. Talking about the QB room, Cade McNamara. I can't remember if this was Paul who commented this about the QB room and kind of dissecting that. It's Cade. It's as much as if we lost Cade and Sullivan had to play, I think we both feel like we could. It's not Deacon. You can still run your offense, but he shows he's not a complete QB either, and he would have the ability to scramble for a few. We could run him a few times. We could scramble, use boot game with him, but he holds the ball. It takes a lot of sacks. It's not gonna be like I think there's a massive drop off from Cade to Sullivan, in my opinion.
Yeah, it won't be a Deacon-like scenario, but it won't be much different.
You're gonna be scoring less than 20 points a game against him. And maybe
actually, sorry, I do want to make one last pick. I think Marco within this new system makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
you saw Lester in his old job. He had a backup QB he would go to in short yards on first down. I think it's just a natural progression of being a heavy shotgun team. If you're going to evolve into this shotgun led team, you need to have a running QB out of it. And when Cade's on the field, they're not going to bite on the QB read, but it's going to make them think about it for a second if you see that on film for a moment. Having that added dimension. And Marco's such an athletic freak in that segment where you could use him in short yards. You could use him on the goal line. I think he's definitely a player that you wouldn't expect to have a large impact on this team, but taking hits off of other guys and putting them on the field, I think is a real possibility, especially if you have Sullivan as your backup where you're not going to be worried about hurting essentially your third string.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I think we actually broke that down when we talked about Lester originally. But so we've broken down the QB room. We've the bunch on the O-line room. That was 2 of the questions we got. The third one is Brevin Dole. Obviously we didn't draft him in this draft, but what do you anticipate his usage to be? If you had to use him, how would you use him?
Yeah, I think he's going to have to compete with Caden Wetjen. I actually kind of walked this back with Kyle after we did our recruiting process because he did make a good point about how he's got so many guys ahead of him in the running back room, and then is he going to have the receiver talent to get on the field out wide? Like I said, I want him just to be fully developed as a receiver. I don't think you have 4-3 talent anywhere in that room. Simple way to do it, I would line up in a 22 or 21 personnel, motion to 5 wide, have him as the most outside receiver. Hopefully you get a man
On linebacker.
Man alignment. You get a linebacker playing outside the numbers, and you throw a deep ball to him.
Yeah.
Other than that,
Wheel routes,
out of the
Jet
backfield,
sweeps.
jet sweeps.
screen plays.
I really hope we don't. I hope we kill the jet sweep out of under center because it becomes such a telegraph thing. Unless you are a
Faking it.
super heavy motion team, you cannot use jet sweeps.
No.
Because I'm watching tape back from last year. You just see that jet sweep coming for 4 seconds. You're like, please don't hand it off. And then they would, and then the guy would just make a play. Like, you just don't see that level of telegraphing anywhere else in college football.
Yeah.
But you saw it under Brian.
Well, I think you actually saw it in Matt Canada's system in 2014, Wisconsin, I want to say, when Melvin Gordon was there. Maybe it's 2014. Or 2013, the Big Ten title game. They used Melvin Gordon on every single jet sweep. They ran for like 600 yards against Nebraska in the Big Ten title game. And then Matt Canada got hired at Maryland as their head coach and OC. And he used jet sweep every single play. It was actually really interesting going into the 2018 game against Maryland was they were going to have this jet sweep game that's like kind of an option style where you have to devote 3 players every single time they motion it.
It had its moment.
So, yeah.
But then teams just figure out how to play it.
Exactly. But I think if you run the jet sweep motion every freaking play,
Well, I think
then
jet
slows-
sweep, it does, you have to run every play, but it looks a lot better out of shotgun.
Yeah.
It just because you have, there's always that added dimensions. Like the QB has the ability to throw the ball instantaneously. He can fake this, and that defender he's holding here and the defender he's holding here. If they get bitey with that, that guy's actually has a choice to make.
Yeah.
Under center, that guy's got no reason to, this QB's about to turn his back to him. He's got 4 seconds before he throws the ball.
Right.
So that under center jet sweep, yes, you'll see us have success with it one time in a game, but the minute we go back to it again, that DN just comes up field and lays the dude.
Yeah. The coordinator goes, hey, you see the jet sweep, take a step.
Take a step up.
Just
Not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Watching back the tape, preparing for the season, it was a real indictment on why we had to move away from this. We were just far too basic.
Yeah.
You have to play like you're playing college football. If you want to be a high-end college football team that's going to compete for Big Ten titles and playoffs as we say we want to, you had to evolve on that side of the ball. There are better ideas out there.
Yeah.
Hopefully Lester has them.
Yep.
All right.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.